Good morning, Ms. Perry. At 3 a.m. this morning, just hours before the summit began, our host nation, the UK, detected exfiltration in its intrusion detection system. This pattern of network traffic could result in buffer overflows and other vulnerabilities such as denial of service. Each nation's server is at risk. You asked us to immediately perform a risk assessment and identify threat vectors and our security risk exposure. We need to identify the attack vectors. Is it distributed denial of service, or are we under other types of attacks? In this briefing, we provide you an update on our current status and what we have accomplished in the last few hours. Prior to the summit, our US team was tasked with setting up our own independent secure comms network. Leaders of the nations at the summit agree we all need to perform forensics analysis on our own respective systems to identify the bad actor. This task and others will be follow on to the risk assessment. Let's look at our vulnerabilities, threats, and possible options to countermeasure the current attack and mitigate future incidents and data breaches. Assessing risk starts with listing and prioritizing relevant threats and vulnerabilities. Typically, risks are incurred as threats exploit vulnerabilities. This condition, along with historical information and expert judgment, contributes to calculation of likelihood. Determining impact or harm in financial terms and exposure provides the final component of risk assessment. Our team conducted vulnerability assessment to examine that weaknesses that possibly can exist within the 5i networks. Vulnerability pose a threat since they can be exploited, causing damage and harm at a global magnitude. We used a 4-step process for assessing vulnerabilities, as stated here. So identifying risk, we assess risk, we then control the risk, and then we review the controls. And now let's look at the possible attack vectors. Ms. Perry, the UK intrusion detection system report showed that the pattern of network traffic is anomalous and the point of the origin is internal. Is someone at the summit involved in this? Given the nature of the summit, participants understand that all nations are allied and have common goal. A colleague told you, ma'am, that no one of the 5i members would have done this. It's got to be the Russians or the Chinese. Friends don't read each other's mail. But don't they? Our team really agrees with you. No one is above suspicion here. Our 5i partners have been known to both collect intelligence and seek to embarrass other partners when it suited their strategic needs. It could have been anyone. Until we know for sure, though, we will continue to regard them as allies. Human factor type of attacks are like an administrator with unrestricted access to data can steal, modify, or damage information or information systems. Software type of attacks could be an attacker would take over a machine, cause a web application or backend database to malfunction, or cause a denial of service attack. Hardware type of attack vectors are like an attacker will be able to install malware on the machine that could be used to steal sensitive data. Operating systems, an attacker can obtain default login credentials and log in and gain unauthorized access to the network, often with root or administrative privileges. And telecommunication attack vectors, an example would be an attacker would obtain a user's login credential, something like a man in the middle, for example, and gain unauthorized access to the network. We categorize weaknesses in the 5i Nation team security into human factor, technology, and policy. The above weaknesses could result in successful exploitation of vulnerabilities or threats. So, what constitutes a threat? A threat is an event or action that has the potential to cause damage. Threats can be a hacker stealing employee's password, or there are five elements to the threat. One is asset. The question is, what are they after? Are they looking for latest technology, breakthroughs? The actor. Who is the attacker? A nation state hacker? Motive. What is their motive? Is it steal critical global intelligence data? Access. What method did the actor use? What is the attack vector? And finally, outcome. Want to damage the reputation of a Five Eye Nation? The summit? Steal critical information? There are various threats to organization systems and infrastructure that come in the form of attacks from internal or external sources. They are active attacks and passive attacks. Passive attacks are stealthy in nature and usually not detectable to the untrained eye. Network sniffers, brute force attacks, and keystroke loggers are good examples of passive attacks. Those can stay quietly hidden in enterprise networks for days and months. On the other hand, active attackers are likely to modify the systems or data, many times using social engineering, such as phishing, to gain access to the systems and network. Spoofed email attacks are active in nature. Not many people would be expecting their brand new Cisco switch to be modified and infected with malware or some type of rootkit before even opening the box. An attack of this nature would be near impossible to ever detect if successfully executed. Though an attack of this nature ever being successfully executed may not be likely, we must not turn a blind eye to the security of the supply chain. T1 has identified these 6 weaknesses in the Five Eye ecosystem that can be exploited by external and internal attackers in technology, human factor, and policy areas. Majority of the identified vulnerabilities lead to data leakage and data loss. So what are the possible paths attackers would use to get to the Five Eye priceless data? A major open door is Wi-Fi connectivity and network access. We are asked to provide wireless connectivity at the summit for our staff. Hackers, external or guests sitting in a lobby, parking lot, or internal staff may piggyback on available unsecured network connections and send spam and even hack into database and steal confidential data. Using mobile phone or smartphones to access information via wireless technology might pose similar security challenges. In fact, a wireless LAN is more susceptible to attacks because it includes both the organization's internal network and the general public segments. Other threats are listed on this slide. The Five Eye Nation members attending the summit have similar internet use as depicted here. As you can see, this is what happens in an internet minute. The attack surface keeps getting bigger and bigger by the minute. In order to recommend countermeasures against vulnerabilities and threats identified, we consider these cybersecurity standards and industry best practices. And we can provide the details for you, ma'am, if you wish. Risks are those potential events that are not yet realized incidents. Risks are identified by performing a vulnerability assessment and also a threat assessment. The individual risks are then considered as a combination of each threat paired with each vulnerability. The risk analysis assessment looks at those pairing and provides a qualitative or a quantitative, which is statistical, ranking of likelihood and or impact severity of those risks. Risk can be calculated quantitatively in formulas using probability and cost for likelihood and exposure. Numerical values for risk can be achieved as well in assessing risk using qualitative analysis techniques. As we said earlier, we use qualitative methodology to rank the identified threats and our risk exposure. Authentication, authorization, and access control cuts across all the three categories of threats: human factor, policy, and technology. Access control is a security technique that can be used to regulate who or what can view or use resources in a computing environment. There are two types of access control: physical and logical. Physical access control limits access to campuses, buildings, rooms, and physical IT assets. The UK Physical Security Team has this area covered. Each nation IT teams are responsible for logical access, which limits connection to computer networks, system files, and data. Identity and access management is all about making sure that the right people can get to the right resources to do their job without exposing those same resources to undue risk from unauthorized parties. But controlling access, managing and securing privileged accounts, and achieving governance are so critical and challenging. This list highlights the best practices to increase data protection and minimize risk. My recommendation for countermeasures against the technology threats are listed on this slide. By, for example, initiating two-factor authentication, having a virtual private network to protect wireless communication, vulnerability scanners. Those will help us identify default login credentials that may still exist in network devices. To remedy buffer overflow, we can look at bug reports that are posted on majority of the OEM websites. Is there updated patches that we need to get out of a regular cycle of upgrading that we need to install immediately? And as you can see, others. And as you can see, we have identified qualitatively the impact of these vulnerabilities. In the area of the human factor, so most network intrusion detection systems, firewalls, and proxy servers are configured to keep intruders out of an organization's IT system. What happens if the intruder is already inside the network? For example, working as an employee or a contractor. Majority of hacking and cyber crimes originate by employees or former employees. They're referred to as insiders. According to Tripwire reports, 77% of greatest security threats are originated by insiders. Insiders can cause harm since they have organizational knowledge of their company's security practices, information, and systems. Organizations must protect themselves against internal cyber threats and actors. They need to understand their motive and implement cybersecurity policies related to employees and employment relationships. Threat actors can be non-malicious employees causing damage, data loss, or misuse the company's network. These issues make up 60% of insider attacks. On the other hand, insider attackers can have malicious intentions. For example, by utilizing social engineering, one of the Five Eyes nations gains access to sensitive intelligence information from an employee of the US team. Another example is disgruntled employee, maybe a spy, who deletes confidential data after he realizes he may be under investigation. People are the most critical asset a company has. Intellectual property, daily operations, customer relations, accounting, and other organizations are heavily people dependent. Our staff, employees, and contractors need to be security conscious, believe in our policies, own our processes, and live out the rules. These countermeasures will help our organization to get closer to achieving this goal. In order to prevent unauthorized use, an organization should document policies outlining logical access to IT systems, networks, and data. Access control and user access management should be key contingencies. Users should be made aware of the policies and their responsibilities for secure usage. The National Institute of Technology and Standards and Technology published a framework for improving critical infrastructure cybersecurity, which gives further guidance for supply chain risk management. This threat is relevant because of the recent increase of supply chain attacks across the world. The US team is prepared now to use our tools, techniques, and the identity of this bad actor. Additionally, we have identified attack vectors and attributes. Our team is ready to establish an incident response plan that can be used in case of another cyber event during the summit. We're examining the service level agreements to see what it will take to get the summit back up and running. We're ready to let our allies know how to protect their networks through an indicator sharing report. We will get to the bottom of this. We assure you, ma'am, no one is above suspicion, not even our allies. Do we have your approval to proceed?